You know what keeps me up at night? It's not market crashes. It's not even another housing bubble. It's the quiet wealth assassin that nobody talks about. The market doesn't reward perfect timing. It rewards time in the market. But our brains are wired against this truth. I'm going to show you something that changed everything for me. It's called the 5-minute rule. And it's not about time management. It's about weaponizing momentum, about tricking your brain into action before fear can hijack the controls. The person who takes imperfect action today will always outperform the person who takes perfect action tomorrow. Always. Chapter 1. The mistake you're making right now. The one killing your financial future while you scroll through real estate listings you'll never buy. While you bookmark investment podcasts you'll never finish. While you tell yourself, I'll start next month. Procrastination. And I'm not talking about the lazy kind. I'm talking about the sophisticated procrastination that feels like progress, the kind where you're researching, planning, analyzing, you've got spreadsheets, you've got bookmarks, you've got a Pinterest board of your dream life, but you've got zero money working for you. Here's the math that should terrify you. If you're 30 years old and you wait just 5 years to start investing $500 a month at a 7% return, you'll retire with $612,000 less than someone who started today. 5 years. That's the cost of waiting for the right time. I learned this the hard way in 2009. I was sitting on $47,000 in cash. Properties in my market had dropped 40%. Everyone I knew was screaming that the world was ending, and I spent 6 months analyzing, researching, waiting for the bottom. Know what happened? I finally bought in late 2010. By then, prices had already recovered 15%. That hesitation cost me about $160,000 in equity over the next decade. Not because I made a bad decision, because I made no decision. And the investors who crushed it? They weren't smarter, they weren't richer, they were faster. You see, the market doesn't reward perfect timing. It rewards time in the market. But our brains are wired against this truth. We've got this evolutionary hardwiring that says, don't move until you're certain. That instinct kept our ancestors alive when a rustle in the bushes might be a tiger. But in finance, that instinct bankrupts you slowly, quietly, while you wait for certainty that never comes. I'm going to show you something that changed everything for me, something I stumbled onto after years of watching brilliant people stay broke, not because they lacked knowledge, but because they couldn't move. It's called the 5-minute rule. And it's not about time management, it's about weaponizing momentum, about tricking your brain into action before fear can hijack the controls. Because here's what I know after 2 decades in this game. The person who takes imperfect action today will always outperform the person who takes perfect action tomorrow. Always. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever caught yourself saying, I'll invest once I understand options better, or I'll start budgeting after the holidays? Yeah, that's the poison working. And this audiobook is the antidote, not theory, not motivation, strategy. The exact ignition system that's helped me deploy over $4 million in capital across 23 properties, build multiple businesses, and mentor hundreds of investors who were stuck in the same paralysis you might be feeling right now. We're going to fix this. But first, you need to understand why you're wired to procrastinate on the very actions that would set you free. Let's go. Chapter 2. Why your brain is sabotaging your bank account. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus came to me in 2018. Smart guy, software engineer, making $140,000 a year. He'd been researching real estate investing for 3 years. 3 years. He had a color-coded Excel model that calculated cash-on-cash returns down to the decimal point. He could quote every book, every podcast, every guru, but he owned 0 properties. When I asked him why, he said, I just need to understand the tax implications better. Once I nail that down, I'm pulling the trigger. You know what Marcus was really saying? I'm terrified of making a mistake, so I'm going to hide behind education until the fear goes away. But fear doesn't go away. It just gets better at disguising itself as prudence. This is what I call analysis paralysis. And it's not a character flaw, it's neuroscience. Your brain has two systems. System 1 is fast, instinctive, emotional. System 2 is slow, deliberate, logical. When you're learning about investing, System 2 is running the show. It loves collecting information. It feels productive, safe. But System 2 has a fatal flaw. It's terrified of uncertainty. And finance? Finance is made of uncertainty. So System 2 will keep demanding more data, more research, one more thing before it gives the green light. Meanwhile, System 1 is freaking out in the background. What if I lose money? What if I look stupid? What if this is the wrong time? System 1 doesn't care about spreadsheets. It cares about survival. And to your primitive brain, losing $20,000 on a bad investment feels like a threat to your life, so you freeze. I see this everywhere. People sitting on cash earning 0.5% in a savings account while inflation runs at 3%. That's a guaranteed loss of purchasing power. But it feels safer than the possibility of loss in the market. Even though historically, the market's up 70% of the time. This is called loss aversion. Nobel Prize-winning research shows we feel losses about 2.5 times more intensely than equivalent gains. Which means the pain of losing $10,000 feels worse than the pleasure of gaining $25,000. Think about that. Your emotional wiring makes rational financial decisions impossible. And here's where it gets worse. Procrastination compounds. Every day you wait, your brain collects more evidence that waiting is the right move. See? I didn't invest last week and the market dropped. Good thing I waited. But you ignore the 47 other weeks where the market went up. This is called confirmation bias. Your brain cherry-picks data that supports inaction. I watched this play out with a colleague in 2020. COVID hits. Market drops 30% in March. He's convinced this is the big one, the crash that never recovers. So he sells everything and goes to cash. Smart move, right? Wrong. By August, the market's back to all-time highs. He's now paralyzed again. It's too high to buy back in. I'll wait for the next dip. That dip never comes. The market runs another 40% over the next 18 months. He's still in cash. He's lost not just money, he's lost belief in his ability to make good decisions. That's the real cost of procrastination. It's not just the dollars, it's the erosion of self-trust. Now, I'm not saying you should be reckless. I'm saying there's a difference between prudent caution and pathological perfectionism. Prudent caution says, I'll learn the basics, run the numbers, and take a calculated risk. Pathological perfectionism says, I'll learn everything before I risk anything. One builds wealth, the other protects poverty. You see, the dirty secret of successful investors, we're not smarter, we're not luckier, we're just more comfortable with discomfort. We've trained ourselves to act despite uncertainty, not because we're fearless, because we understand something critical. Inaction is a decision, and it's usually the worst one. When you choose not to invest, you're not avoiding risk. You're choosing the risk of inflation, the risk of missed opportunity, the risk of working until you're 70 because you never let your money work for you. Every day I talk to people who tell me they're not ready, and I ask, what would ready look like? They usually can't answer, because ready is a moving target their brain invented to justify staying safe. Here's what I wish someone had told me at 25. You will never feel ready. You will never have perfect information. The right time is a myth sold to you by people who profit from your hesitation. The right time was yesterday. The second best time is right now. But I get it. Knowing this intellectually doesn't make it easier. Your brain's still screaming at you to wait. That's why the 5-minute rule is so powerful. It doesn't fight your brain's wiring. It hijacks it. We'll get to that. But first, you need to see the full cost of what you're doing. Because if you don't feel the pain of inaction, you'll never be motivated enough to change. Let me show you what procrastination is really costing you. Chapter 3. The compound interest of doing nothing. I'm going to tell you about two investors. Both start with nothing. Both die millionaires. But one of them retires 15 years earlier and leaves his kids 3 times as much. The difference? 5 years. Meet Amy and Brandon, both 25 years old. Both making $60,000 a year. Both commit to investing 15% of their income every year until they retire. Amy starts immediately. She invests $9,000 a year from age 25 to 65. Total contributions, $360,000. Brandon waits. He's going to get his finances in order first. He starts at 30. He invests $9,000 a year from age 30 to 65. Total contributions, $315,000. Same strategy, same returns. Brandon even puts in almost the same amount of money. So they should be close, right? At age 65, assuming a 7% annual return, Amy has $197 million. Brandon has $1 million. Amy has nearly double what Brandon has. By waiting 5 years, just 5 years, Brandon's account is $870,000 lighter. That's the magic and the horror of compound interest. It's exponential. Those first 5 years of contributions, they're not working for 40 years. They're working for 40 years. By the time Amy's first $9,000 contribution reaches age 65, it's turned into $134,000. Just that first year. Brandon doesn't get that multiplier. He lost it to procrastination. Now let's make it worse. Let's talk about real estate, where the compounding is even more vicious. I bought my first rental property in 2007 for $215,000. Terrible timing, right? 6 months before the crash. But I held it, rented it out. Today, that property is worth $485,000. I've collected about $190,000 in net rental income over 17 years, and I've paid down $115,000 in principal. Total wealth created from that one decision, about $675,000. Now, imagine I had waited. The market's too hot, I'll wait for the crash. Okay, fine. The crash happens in 2008. Prices drop 35%. The $215,000 property is now $140,000. Perfect time to buy, right? But I don't, because now everyone's saying, it's going lower, banks are failing, wait. So I wait another year. By 2010, I finally buy, but by then, prices have already bounced 20%. So I buy at $168,000. Great deal, right? Compared to $215,000, absolutely. Except, by waiting 3 years, I lost 3 years of appreciation, 3 years of rent, 3 years of principal paydown. That property would be worth the same $485,000 today, but I'd have $60,000 less in collected rent. I'd have $35,000 less in principal paid down, and I'd have 3 fewer years of depreciation deductions on my taxes. Call it another $40,000 in lost tax benefits. So by timing the market perfectly, I actually lost about $135,000 compared to just buying at the worst possible time and holding. Timing beats timing every single time. But here's what really kills me. I see people making this mistake with budgeting. They'll tell me, I'm going to get serious about my spending once I get my next raise. Or, I'll start tracking expenses after the holidays. Dude, if you can't manage $50,000, you won't manage $65,000. You'll just have more expensive problems. I had a friend who made $75,000 a year and was always broke. He got a promotion, started making $120,000. Within a year, he was more broke than before. Because the issue wasn't his income, it was his habits. And habits don't fix themselves, they compound. You ever notice how credit card debt sneaks up on you? You swipe for just this one thing, but you don't pay it off. So next month, there's interest, you swipe again, more interest. Before you know it, you're paying $200 a month just in interest charges. That's $2,400 a year. Over 10 years, if you'd invested that at 7%, you'd have $33,000. But because you waited to get serious about debt, that $33,000 vanished, along with your peace of mind. This is what I mean by the compound interest of doing nothing. It's not just about what you don't gain, it's about what you actively lose. Every month you don't start an emergency fund, you're one flat tire away from more credit card debt. Every year you don't contribute to your 401k, you lose not just your contribution, but your employer's match. That's free money you're leaving on the table. If your employer matches 4% and you're making $70,000, that's $2,800 a year. Over 30 years at 7% growth, that's $267,000 in employer money you just ignored, because you were waiting to understand investing better. Here's the brutal truth. The market doesn't care about your timeline. Compounding doesn't care about your feelings. And opportunities don't wait for you to be ready. I learned this watching my dad, smart man, worked his whole life, made decent money, but he never invested. Always said he'd start when things calmed down. Guess what? Things never calmed down. He retired at 68 with $84,000 in savings and a Social Security check. He's fine. But he's not free. Meanwhile, his coworker, who made less money but started investing at 30, retired at 58 with $1.3 million. Same company, same general lifestyle, different mindset. One understood compound interest. The other became a cautionary tale about it. So when you tell yourself, I'll start next year, what you're really saying is, I'm okay with losing tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars because facing my fear is uncomfortable. And look, I get it. Starting is hard. There's always a reason to wait. The market's too high. The market's too volatile. You need to pay off your car first. You need a bigger emergency fund. You need to research more. But those are excuses your brain manufactures to protect you from the discomfort of risk. What if I told you there's a way to act without conquering that fear? A way to trick your brain into momentum before it can mount a defense? That's next. But first, ask yourself, how much has procrastination already cost you? Not in hypothetical dollars, in real dollars, in the actual money you didn't make because you waited. Feel that? That little pit in your stomach? Good. That's the wake-up call. Don't ignore it. Chapter 4. The 5-Minute Financial Ignition System. Okay, here's where everything changes. I'm about to give you the single most powerful technique I've ever used to bypass procrastination. It's stupid simple. So simple, you might dismiss it. Don't. This technique has helped me deploy millions in capital, launch 3 businesses, and get dozens of coaching clients off the sidelines and into the game. It's based on a principle discovered by a Russian mathematician in the 1980s and weaponized by productivity experts ever since. It's called the 5-minute rule. Here's how it works. When you're procrastinating on a financial task, opening a brokerage account, analyzing a property, creating a budget, you commit to working on it for just 5 minutes, not an hour, not until it's done. 5 minutes, that's it. After 5 minutes, you can stop. No guilt, no shame. You gave it 5 minutes, and that's enough. Except, here's the magic. You almost never stop at 5 minutes. Let me explain why this works. Remember System 1 and System 2 from earlier? Your emotional brain and your logical brain? The reason you procrastinate isn't because the task is hard. It's because starting feels overwhelming. Your brain looks at, open a Roth IRA and sees a mountain, paperwork, decisions, risk, complexity. So it shuts down. But your brain can handle 5 minutes. 5 minutes isn't threatening. It's barely a commitment. So your emotional brain gives the green light. And once you start, the psychological inertia flips. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. After 5 minutes of researching Roth IRA providers, you're already on the website. The form's half filled out. Your brain thinks, well, I might as well finish this now. Boom, you just opened a retirement account. Not because you conquered your fear, because you tricked it. I discovered this accidentally in 2011. I'd been putting off analyzing a property for 3 weeks. Every time I sat down to run the numbers, I'd get distracted, check email, make coffee. Suddenly it's bedtime and I did nothing. One night I told myself, 5 minutes, just pull up the listing and look at the rent comps, that's it. 5 minutes later, I was deep in the cash flow model. 20 minutes later, I'd submitted an offer. That property made me $34,000 in profit when I sold it 4 years later. All because I committed to 5 minutes. Now, let's get tactical. Here's how you weaponize this for every financial goal. For investing paralysis, commit to spending 5 minutes researching one index fund, just one. After 5 minutes, if you're done, you're done. But I bet you'll end up opening a Vanguard account and funding it. For budgeting resistance, commit to logging 5 minutes of expenses in an app, just 1 day's worth. After 5 minutes, stop. But you'll probably keep going. And once you see where your money's actually going, you'll want to fix it. For debt avoidance, commit to listing your debts for 5 minutes, just the numbers, balances, interest rates. After 5 minutes, close the spreadsheet. But seeing it all in one place will trigger your problem-solving brain. You'll start strategizing payoff plans without even realizing it. For real. Estate fear. Commit to browsing listings for 5 minutes. Just look. Don't analyze. Don't stress. After 5 minutes, close the tab. But you'll probably find yourself pulling up the calculator and running numbers. You see the pattern? The 5-minute rule doesn't fight resistance. It makes resistance irrelevant. You're not committing to become an investor. You're committing to 5 minutes. That's emotionally manageable. And once you've started, the hardest part is over. But here's the key. You have to mean it. You have to genuinely give yourself permission to stop after 5 minutes. If your brain knows you're lying, that you're really committing to an hour and just calling it 5 minutes, it'll resist. The magic only works if the commitment is real. I use this constantly. Just last month, I was avoiding reviewing my quarterly business expenses, boring as hell. Kept putting it off. Finally told myself, 5 minutes, just open the spreadsheet and glance at Q1. 5 minutes later, I'd found 400 in subscription charges I didn't need, canceled them. That's $7,200 a year back in my pocket, because I gave myself permission to start small. Now let me show you how to combine the 5-minute rule with what I call micro-commitments. These are tiny, specific actions that build unstoppable momentum. Example 1. Starting an emergency fund. Don't commit to saving $10,000. That's overwhelming. Commit to this. I'll transfer $20 to savings right now. That's it. 5 minutes. One action. After you do it, you can stop. But you probably won't. You'll start thinking, I could set up an automatic transfer. I could round up my purchases. One micro-commitment triggers the next. Example 2. Learning about real estate. Don't commit to reading 3 books on real estate investing. Commit to this. I'll read 1 chapter of 1 book for 5 minutes. That's manageable. You'll probably read 3 chapters, and the knowledge will itch at you until you take action. Example 3. Tackling credit card debt. Don't commit to paying off $15,000 in debt. Commit to this. I'll pay $50 extra on the highest interest card right now. 5 minutes, 1 payment. But once you see that balance drop even by $50, you'll feel the momentum. You'll start looking for ways to cut expenses, to throw more at it. Micro-commitments work because they're concrete. Your brain hates abstract goals. Get my finances in order means nothing. It's vague. Your brain can't visualize it, so it procrastinates. But transfer $20 to savings is crystal clear. It's binary. You either do it or you don't. And once it's done, you feel accomplished. That little hit of dopamine? That's your brain rewarding you for taking action, and your brain loves rewards. It'll start looking for more actions to take. This is how you build financial momentum, not with grand plans, not with perfect knowledge, with tiny, consistent actions that stack on top of each other until you're moving too fast to stop. I've watched investors who spent years paralyzed buy their first property within 30 days of learning this technique, not because they suddenly got smarter, because they stopped trying to learn everything and started doing something. And here's the beautiful part. The 5-minute rule works on maintenance too. Once you've started investing, you'll face new forms of procrastination, rebalancing your portfolio, reviewing your budget, analyzing new deals. The 5-minute rule keeps you moving. Every Sunday, I commit to 5 minutes reviewing my portfolio. Just 5 minutes. That's it. But every time, I end up spending 20 minutes because I spot something that needs adjusting, and that 20 minutes has saved me tens of thousands in missed opportunities and bad holdings. So here's your assignment. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Before you finish this chapter, commit to one 5-minute action. Pick the financial goal you've been avoiding the longest, the one that makes you anxious just thinking about it. Maybe it's opening that brokerage account. Maybe it's confronting your debt. Maybe it's running the numbers on a property you've been eyeing. Whatever it is, commit to 5 minutes. Set a timer. When it goes off, you can stop guilt-free. But you won't. Because once you've started, your brain will take over. And 5 minutes from now, you'll be further along than you've been in years. That's the power of ignition. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need complete knowledge. You need momentum. And momentum starts with the smallest possible action. Take it now. 5 minutes. Go. Chapter 5. The perfect moment is a myth sold by cowards. Let me tell you about the investor who cost himself $430,000. His name was Jeff. I met him in 2013. He'd been following the market for years, had his eye on a duplex in an emerging neighborhood, great property, listed at $180,000, numbers worked, cash flowed from day one. He could have pulled the trigger with an FHA loan and only 3.5% down. But Jeff wanted to wait. He wanted to save up 20% so he wouldn't pay PMI. Made sense, right? Why throw away money on mortgage insurance? So he waited, saved diligently. 2 years later, he's got his 20% down, but that duplex, it's now $265,000. The neighborhood gentrified. He missed it. He finally buys a different property in 2015 for $240,000. Decent deal. But if he'd bought that original duplex in 2013 with 3.5% down, he'd have paid about $8,000 in PMI over the next few years, but he'd have gained $85,000 in equity by 2015. Net, $77,000 ahead, and that's not even counting the rental income he missed. 2 years of cash flow at about $400 a month after expenses, another $9,600. By waiting for the perfect 20% down, Jeff lost $86,600 in 2 years, and the property he did buy, it appreciated slower, didn't have the same rent growth. Today, that original duplex is worth $485,000. His property is worth $380,000. The perfect moment cost him $105,000 in equity alone. Add in the opportunity cost of better cash flow, and he's over $150,000 behind where he could have been, all because he waited for perfect conditions that never came. This is the lie we tell ourselves. I'll invest when I have more saved, when the market dips, when I understand options better, when my credit score hits 750, when I pay off my car, when Mercury's out of retrograde. We're always one condition away from taking action. But here's what nobody tells you. There will always be a reason to wait. Your brain is an excuse-generating machine, and it's good at its job. In 2014, people told me the market was too hot. It's been climbing for 5 years. It's due for a correction. Wait. I didn't. I bought 3 properties that year. Those properties are up an average of 92% today. In 2016, people told me interest rates were rising. Wait for them to drop again. I didn't. I locked in at 3.875%. Rates did drop for about 6 months. Then they climbed to 5%, then 7%. I saved hundreds of thousands in interest by not waiting. In 2020, people told me the pandemic crash was coming. Everything's going to zero. Cash is king. Wait. I didn't. I bought stocks in April and May 2020. My portfolio's up 140% on those positions. You notice the pattern? The people waiting for perfect conditions are always waiting. The people taking imperfect action are always winning. Because here's the secret. The perfect moment doesn't exist. Markets are messy. Life is messy. There's always uncertainty, always risk, always a reason to hesitate. But successful investors, we don't wait for certainty. We manage probability. We ask, what's likely to happen? Not, what's guaranteed to happen? And the probabilities are clear. Over any 20-year period, stocks go up about 97% of the time. Real estate appreciates in 85% of markets. Inflation erodes cash 100% of the time. So the safe choice, sitting in cash, waiting for perfect conditions, is actually the riskiest choice. You're guaranteed to lose purchasing power, guaranteed to miss opportunities, guaranteed to stay stuck. Let me show you what this looks like in real numbers. Let's say you're 35 years old with $50,000 saved. You're debating, invest it now or wait for better conditions. Scenario A, you invest it today in a boring S&P 500 index fund. Average 30-year return, about 10% annually. At age 65, that $50,000 becomes $872 in scenario B. You wait 5 years for the right time. You find it. Perfect entry point. Market's down 20%. Great deal. You invest at 35% lower prices. Same 30-year holding period from your entry. But you've lost 5 years of growth. At age 65, that $50,000 becomes $540,000. By waiting for perfect timing, you lost $330,000, even though you bought at a better price. This is what timing the market people don't understand. The when matters less than the how long. Time in the market obliterates timing the market, always. Now, I'm not saying be reckless. I'm not saying close your eyes and throw money at the first thing you see. I'm saying do your basic due diligence, run your numbers, and move. Because the cost of waiting isn't just financial, it's psychological. Every day you procrastinate, you're training your brain that inaction is acceptable. That fear is a good reason to freeze. You're building a neural pathway that says, when I'm scared, I stop. That pattern doesn't stay in your finances. It bleeds into everything, your career, your relationships, your health. You become someone who waits, who hesitates, who watches life happen to other people. I see this all the time with budgeting. People tell me, I'll start tracking my spending after the holidays. Why? What changes after the holidays? Nothing. You're just kicking the can down the road. Because starting means confronting uncomfortable truths, like the fact that you spent $8,000 eating out last year, but confronting that truth is how you change it. Waiting just makes it worse. Next year it'll be $9,000, then $10,000. The pain doesn't go away, it compounds. So here's what I want you to do. Right now, think about the financial goal you've been delaying, the one you've been waiting for the right time to tackle. Now ask yourself, what would have to be true for this to be the perfect moment? Write it down. Be specific. Interest rates at 3%. Market down 15%. 20,000 in savings, whatever it is. Now ask, is this condition necessary or am I using it as an excuse? Be honest. 9 times out of 10, it's an excuse. You don't need rates at 3%. You need a property that cash flows at current rates. You don't need the market down 15%. You need time for compounding to work. You don't need 20,000ers. You need to start with what you have. I'm not saying conditions don't matter. I'm saying they matter less than you think. And the longer you wait for perfect conditions, the more opportunities slip through your fingers. You want to know what the perfect moment actually looks like? It's the moment you decide to stop waiting. That's it. That's the only moment that changes anything. Because while you're waiting for the perfect interest rate, someone else is buying properties. While you're waiting for the perfect dip, someone else is compounding gains. While you're waiting to be ready, someone else is building wealth. The market doesn't reward readiness, it rewards presence. And you can't be present if you're perpetually preparing for a future that never comes. So let me ask you, what are you waiting for? Really, what's the real reason you haven't started? If you can't answer that in one clear sentence, you're lying to yourself. And that lie is costing you a fortune. Stop waiting. Start moving. Even if it's imperfect, even if it's scary, especially if it's scary. The perfect moment is a myth. But momentum is real. And it starts the second you stop believing you need permission from the universe to take action. You don't. You never did. Chapter 6. How to build financial courage in 15-minute intervals. You ever notice how fear shrinks when you face it in pieces? Like, the idea of running a marathon is terrifying, but running for 15 minutes? That's just a jog. Yet somehow, millions of people finish marathons by stringing together enough 15-minute jogs. Same principle applies to financial courage. You don't need to wake up tomorrow as a fearless investor. You just need to build tolerance for discomfort in small doses. And I'm going to show you exactly how. This technique changed my life. Before I learned it, I was paralyzed by big decisions. Buying my first property? I spent 3 months in analysis paralysis, starting my first business, 6 months of researching before I pulled the trigger. I was so scared of making mistakes that I made the biggest mistake of all, doing nothing. Then I read about exposure therapy. It's a psychological technique where you gradually expose yourself to the thing you fear in controlled, manageable doses. Scared of public speaking? Start by speaking to one person, then 5, then 20. Each exposure reduces the fear response until it's not scary anymore. I thought, can this work for financial fear? Turns out, yes, absolutely. Here's how it works. You identify the financial action that scares you most. Let's say it's investing in stocks. The thought of losing money in the market makes you nauseous. You've been sitting in cash for years because the risk feels unbearable. Instead of forcing yourself to invest $10,000 and white-knuckling through the anxiety, you start microscopic. You invest $100, just $100. That's it. Now, $100 is small enough that even if you lost it all tomorrow, it wouldn't materially impact your life. But it's big enough to feel real. You're in the game. You've got skin in it. For the next 15 minutes, you sit with that discomfort. You log into your brokerage account. You watch the number fluctuate. You feel the little stomach flutter when it drops $2. You notice your brain screaming, "Sell! Get out! This is dangerous!" But you don't sell. You just observe. You watch the panic arise and pass. Because here's the secret. Emotions have a shelf life. Anxiety peaks in about 10 minutes, then starts to decay. If you can ride it out for 15 minutes without reacting, your brain learns, "Oh, we survived. It wasn't actually dangerous." Repeat this daily. Every day you log in for 15 minutes. Watch your $100 move. Some days it's up, some days it's down. But over time, your nervous system habituates. The anxiety response weakens. After continue a week, you barely feel anything looking at your portfolio. Now you add another $100. Same process, 15 minutes a day. Let your brain adjust. After a month, you're invested with $500 or $1,000, and it doesn't feel scary anymore because you trained your fear response like a muscle. You taught it. Market volatility is not life-threatening. I can handle this. This is exactly how I conquered real estate fear. My first property? I was terrified. What if the tenant destroys it? What if I can't find a tenant? What if the market crashes? My brain was in full catastrophe mode, so I started small. I didn't buy a $300,000 property. I bought a $90,000 condo in a B neighborhood. If everything went wrong, I could absorb it. And for the first few months, I was anxious every single day, checking on the property, worrying about the tenant, imagining disasters. But after 6 months, the tenant paid on time every month. Nothing broke. The property appreciated $8,000. My brain recalibrated. Oh, owning real estate isn't as scary as I thought. That gave me the confidence to buy a bigger property. Then another. Now I own 23 units. Not because I'm braver than you, because I systematically desensitized myself to the fear. Here's how you apply this to any financial goal. For budgeting fear. Don't overhaul your entire life on day one. Start by tracking one category for 15 minutes a day. Just restaurants or gas, that's it. After a week, add another category. Build up slowly. Your brain will adjust without revolting. For debt anxiety, don't stare at your total debt and spiral into despair. Commit to 15 minutes a day reviewing one account, just one. Look at the balance, look at the interest. Make a micro payment. After a week, add another account. The fear loses its grip when you face it in pieces. For investing paralysis, don't try to master the entire market before you start. Invest the smallest amount you can. $50, $100, and commit to checking it for 15 minutes a day. Let your brain see that volatility isn't fatal. Build tolerance, then scale up. For real estate terror, don't buy a property first. Start by touring one property a week, just 15 minutes. Look at it. Run the numbers. Walk away. You're training your brain to be around the thing that scares you without committing. After a few months, buying won't feel like jumping off a cliff. It'll feel like the next logical step. This is what separates successful investors from perpetual researchers. We're not more courageous, we're more conditioned. We've built up our tolerance for discomfort through repeated controlled exposure. And here's the beautiful part. This compounds. Every time you take a small scary action and survive it, you raise your fear ceiling. Things that would have paralyzed you 6 months ago now feel manageable. You build financial courage like a muscle, and muscles grow through stress and recovery, not avoidance. But here's the critical part. You have to actually feel the fear. You can't just intellectually understand it. You have to sit in it, let it wash over you, breathe through it. Notice that you're okay. That's the exposure part. If you distract yourself, scroll on your phone, close the app immediately, you don't build tolerance. You reinforce avoidance. 15 minutes, no distractions, just you and the uncomfortable feeling. Do that daily, and within a month, that feeling won't control you anymore. I coach clients through this, constantly. One guy, David, was terrified of looking at his retirement account. He'd been avoiding it for 3 years because he was scared of what he'd find. I told him, set a timer for 15 minutes, log in, look at the number, breathe. That's it. He almost threw up the first time. His account was $140,000 lower than he remembered, but he sat with it. Day 2, still uncomfortable, but less. Day 3, curiosity started to creep in. Why did it drop so much? He started researching. By week 2, he'd reallocated his portfolio and set up automatic contributions. The account's now up $220,000 from where he started, all because he spent 15 minutes facing what he'd been avoiding. This technique works everywhere in finance. Scared to negotiate your salary? Start small. Negotiate with a car salesman or a flea market vendor. Just 15 minutes of uncomfortable negotiation. Build the skill in low-stakes environments. Then scale up. Scared to ask for a raise? Write the email but don't send it. Sit with it for 15 minutes. Edit it. The next day, sit with it again. By day 5, hitting send won't feel like a crisis. It'll feel like the next step. This is how you stop being ruled by fear, not by pretending it doesn't exist, not by manifesting courage, by training your nervous system to recognize that the things you're afraid of aren't actually dangerous. Because here's the truth. Most financial fear is imaginary. It's not based on real danger. It's based on stories your brain tells you. What if I lose everything? What if I look stupid? What if I fail? But when you actually face the thing, invest the money, look at the debt, tour the property, you realize this isn't a tiger. This is a spreadsheet. This is a number. This is a decision I can make rationally. The fear only has power when it's hypothetical. The moment you engage with reality, the fear shrinks. Because reality is almost never as bad as your imagination. So here's your next assignment. Pick the financial fear that's been running your life, the one that keeps you frozen. And commit to 15 minutes a day engaging with it, not solving it, not conquering it, just engaging with it, exposing yourself to it in a controlled way. Let your brain see, this is uncomfortable, but I'm safe. Do that for 30 days and you'll be a different person. Not because you've eliminated fear, because you've learned you don't need to. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. And action gets easier every single time you prove to your brain that the fear was lying. Start today. 15 minutes. One small exposure. Watch what happens. Chapter 7. The Myth of Enough Knowledge. I'm going to tell you something that might piss you off. You don't need to know more. You need to do more. Let me explain. I meet people constantly who've read 30 books on investing. They can quote Benjamin Graham. They understand the Greeks in options trading. They know more about rates than most financial advisors. And they own nothing. 0 stocks, 0 properties, 0 wealth-building assets. They're what I call professional students. They've turned learning into procrastination, and they don't even realize it. Because here's the trick your brain plays on you. Learning feels productive. It feels like progress. You're listening to podcasts, reading articles, taking notes. Your brain releases dopamine. Good job, we're working on our goals. But you're not. You're researching your goals, which is not the same thing. I spent 3 years doing this before I bought my first property. 3 years. I read every book. I analyzed hundreds of deals on paper. I could calculate cap rates in my sleep. But I was terrified to actually buy something. Because what if I didn't know enough? What if there was one more thing I was missing? So I kept learning, kept preparing, kept waiting for that magical moment when I'd know enough to feel confident. You want to know when that moment came? Never. It never came. I still don't know everything. I never will. But at a certain point, I realized the investors making money aren't the smartest ones. They're the ones who take action with incomplete information. Because here's the dirty secret. You will never have complete information. Markets change, regulations change, interest rates change. There's always new stuff to learn. If you wait until you know enough, you'll wait forever. And while you're waiting, people who know less than you are out there buying properties, building portfolios, and compounding wealth. Not because they're smarter, because they understand something critical. Real learning happens through doing, not studying. Let me show you what I mean. You can read 50 books on swimming, study stroke mechanics, watch Olympic swimmers on YouTube, understand the physics of buoyancy. But until you jump in the water and actually swim, you don't know how to swim. Finance is the same. You can study real estate for years, but you won't truly understand it until you've negotiated with a seller, dealt with a difficult tenant, or navigated a surprise repair. That's when the lessons stick, because they're real. I learned more in my first 6 months of owning a rental property than I did in 3 years of reading. Not because the books were wrong, because experience teaches lessons that books can't. Like the fact that good deals aren't found in perfect markets, they're found in imperfect situations that you can improve, or that cash flow projections are always slightly wrong because reality is messy, or that the biggest risk in real estate isn't the property, it's your own decision-making under pressure. You don't learn that from a book. You learn it by doing, by making mistakes, by adjusting, and that's terrifying, right? Because mistakes cost money. What if you screw up? What if you lose $10,000 on a bad investment? Here's what I wish someone had told me. You're going to make mistakes anyway, whether you start today or in 3 years. The difference is, if you start today, you'll make smaller mistakes with less capital at risk, and you'll have more time to recover and compound the lessons. Waiting to be ready doesn't eliminate mistakes. It just makes them more expensive. Because by the time you finally act, the stakes are higher, you're older, you've got less time to recover, and you're investing more capital because you've been sitting on cash for years. So you make the same mistakes you would have made early on, but now they're magnified. That's way worse than starting small and screwing up when it doesn't matter as much. I see this with people who wait until they're 45 to start investing. They've read everything. They finally feel ready. So they drop $50,000 into a stock portfolio. Then the market dips 10%. They panic and sell. They lose $5,000. If they'd started at 30 with $5,000, they'd have made the same mistake, but they'd have lost $500, and they'd have had 15 years to learn from it. Instead, they waited for confidence that never came, and their first mistake cost them 10 times more. This is why I tell people, start before you're ready. Start with an amount you can afford to lose. Make your mistakes small. Learn fast. Scale up once you know what you're doing. Because here's the secret. Enough knowledge is a moving target. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. I've been investing for 20 plus years, and I still don't feel like I know enough. But I'm not waiting for that feeling anymore. I act anyway. And that's the shift that changes everything. You stop asking, do I know enough? And start asking, do I know enough to take the next step? For example, do I know enough to open a brokerage account and invest in an index fund? Yes. You need about 20 minutes of research. That's it. Pick Vanguard or Fidelity. Choose a target date fund or an S&P 500 index. Boom, done. You're investing. Do you need to understand options, futures, and leveraged ETFs first? No, that's advanced knowledge. You're stalling by trying to master advanced topics before you've handled the basics. This is where people screw up. They treat knowledge like a linear path. First, I'll learn stocks, then bonds, then real estate, then options, then I'll be ready. But knowledge doesn't work that way in finance. It's iterative. You learn a little, you do a little, you learn more from the doing, you adjust. Repeat forever. The people who succeed aren't the ones who learned everything first. They're the ones who learned enough to start, then learned the rest through action. So let me ask you, what financial action are you avoiding because you don't know enough yet? Now ask, what's the minimum amount of knowledge you need to take a small, reversible step in that direction? If it's investing, you need to know, what's an index fund? How do I open an account? How much should I invest to start? That's it. 3 questions. You can answer those in an hour. Then you act. You don't need to. Understand modern portfolio theory. You don't need to read The Intelligent Investor. Those are great, but they're not required to start. They're excuses disguised as diligence. Same with real estate. To analyze your first property, you need to know, what's the rent? What are the expenses? Does it cash flow? That's it. You can learn that in an afternoon. Everything else, tax strategies, 1031 exchanges, creative financing, you can learn after you've bought a property. Because then you'll have context, then the lessons will stick. But people do the opposite. They try to learn advanced strategies before they've mastered the basics. It's like trying to learn calculus before you understand addition. You're just confusing yourself and creating more reasons to procrastinate. Here's my rule. If you can't explain a concept simply, you don't understand it well enough to use it yet. And if you don't understand it well enough to use it, you don't need it right now. Master the basics. Take action. Learn the advanced stuff when you actually need it, because here's what nobody tells you. The best investors I know aren't the smartest. They're the most adaptive. They don't know everything up front. They know enough to start, then they learn as they go. They make mistakes. They adjust. They keep moving. That's the game, not perfect knowledge, continuous learning through action. So stop waiting for the mythical moment when you know enough. That moment doesn't exist. You already know enough to take the next small step. You're just scared. And that's okay. Feel the fear. Take the step anyway. Because while you're studying, someone with half your knowledge is building wealth, not because they're smarter, because they moved. Your turn. What's the one thing you already know enough about to start? Do it today. Then learn the rest as you go. That's how you actually build expertise, not in theory, in reality. Chapter 8. Why micro-commitments beat massive action. Every time. Here's a truth that took me way too long to learn. Big goals don't need big actions. They need consistent actions. I used to think success was about massive moves. Quit your job, buy 10 properties, go all in, hustle 80 hours a week. That's what the gurus preached. 10x your life. Go hard or go home. So I tried. I'd have these bursts of intense motivation. I'd work 14-hour days for a week. I'd analyze 30 properties in a weekend. I'd overhaul my entire budget in one sitting. And then I'd burn out. I'd crash. I'd do nothing for a month. The motivation would fade, and I'd slip back into old habits. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. It wasn't until I read a study on habit formation that everything clicked. The research showed that small daily actions create more lasting change than occasional big efforts. Not because small actions are inherently better, but because they're sustainable. And sustainability beats intensity every single time. Let me show you how this plays out in finance. Example 1. Emergency fund massive action approach. I'm going to save $10,000 this year. You cut your spending to the bone for 2 months, save $2,000, then you burn out. Go on a spending spree to compensate. End the year with $500 saved. Failure. Micro-commitment approach. I'm going to transfer $20 to savings every Monday. You barely notice the $20. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice. You keep it up all year. End the year with $140 saved. Plus, you built a habit. Year 2, you bump it to 30s, then $50 in 5 years. You've got 15,000 success. Example 2, investing massive action approach. I'm going to invest $10,000 today. You dump a lump sum into the market. It drops 15% the next month. You panic. You obsess over it. You sell at a loss. You're traumatized. You never invest again. Micro-commitment approach. I'm going to invest $100 every week no matter what. Some weeks the market's up. Some weeks it's down. You don't care. You're dollar cost averaging. Over time, your cost basis smooths out. You're never buying at the absolute peak. And because you're doing it every week, volatility becomes normal. You build tolerance. 10 years later, you've invested $52,000 and it's grown to $90,000 success. Example 3. Debt payoff. Massive action approach. I'm throwing every extra dollar at my debt. You pay $3,000 extra 1 month. Feels amazing. But then your car needs repairs. You've got no buffer. You panic. You cut back on payments, lose momentum, still in debt 3 years later. Micro-commitment approach. I'm paying an extra $100 on my highest interest card every month no matter what. It's small enough that you can sustain it. You adjust your budget around it. It becomes automatic. 3 years later, you've paid off $3,600 in extra principal. Plus, you've built a system. When you get a raise, you bump the extra payment to $200, then $300. The debt disappears steadily, without drama. You see the pattern? Micro-commitments work because they're ridiculously easy to maintain. They don't require willpower. They don't require motivation. They just require consistency. And consistency is the most underrated wealth-building tool on the planet. Here's why. Compounding doesn't reward intensity. It rewards time. A small action repeated daily for 10 years will always outperform a big action taken once or twice. Think about it. Would you rather work out intensely for 6 hours once a month, work out for 30 minutes 6 days a week? The second one builds a body. The first one just makes you sore. Finance is the same. The person investing $500 a month for 30 years will crush the person who drops $50,000 in the market once and never touches it again. Not because 500 a month is better, because it's sustained. It captures every market cycle. It compounds relentlessly. But here's where people mess up. They set micro commitments that are too big. They say, I'll invest $500 a month, but they're living paycheck to paycheck. So they miss a month, then another. Then they quit because they failed. That's not a failure. That's a poorly calibrated commitment. If $500 a month stresses you out, drop it to $100 or $50 or $20. The amount doesn't matter. The consistency does. I'd rather see you invest $20 a month for 30 years than $500 a month for 6 months and then quit. The 20 a month builds a habit. The $500 builds stress. And here's the beautiful part. Once the micro commitment becomes automatic, you can scale it up. After 6 months of 20 a week, bump it to $30, then $50. Your brain won't resist because it's gradual. It's not a dramatic change. It's just slightly more of what you're already doing. This is how I built my entire portfolio. I didn't start by buying a 10-unit apartment building. I started with one 90,000 condo, just one. That micro-commitment taught me everything: how to screen tenants, how to manage maintenance, how to handle cash flow, how to deal with stress. After a year, I bought another one, then another. Each property was a micro-commitment to owning more real estate. 10 years later, I own 23 units. Not because I made one massive move, because I made 23 small ones. Same with my business. I didn't quit my job and launch a coaching company. I started with one client, just one. I coached him for 3 months, learned what worked, what didn't. Then I took on another client, then another. Micro commitments. Today, I run a multiple 6-figure business, but it started with one. This is the opposite of what the internet tells you. Everyone wants the overnight success story. The guy who flipped 100 houses in his first year. The woman who went from broke to millionaire in 18 months. Those stories exist, but they're rare. And they're usually survivorship bias. For every one person who went all in and succeeded, there are 50 who went all in and crashed. Micro commitments are sustainable. They work for normal people. People with jobs, with families, with obligations, people who can't afford to take massive risks. And here's the secret. Over time, micro commitments become massive action. If you invest $100 a week for 20 years, you've invested $104,000. That's not small. That's life-changing. But it never felt massive. It felt manageable. That's the magic. So here's how you implement this right now. Step 1, pick one financial goal you've been struggling with. Step 2, ask yourself, what's the smallest action I could take toward this goal that I'd barely notice? If it's investing, maybe it's 10 a week. If it's budgeting, maybe it's tracking just one expense category. If it's debt payoff, maybe it's $25 extra per month on your smallest balance. Step 3, commit to that micro action for 30 days. Non-negotiable. Don't skip. Don't adjust. Just do it. Step 4, after 30 days, evaluate. Did you do it consistently? Great. Now bump it up by 20%. If you did 10 hours a week, go to 12. If you did 25 a month, go to 30. Step 5, repeat every 30 days. Gradual increases, steady momentum. Before you know it, you're doing 5x, and it's what you started with. And it still feels easy. This is how you bypass willpower. Willpower is finite. It runs out. Micro commitments don't require willpower. They require automation. You set it up once, then it just happens. I have automatic transfers set up for everything. $200 a week into my brokerage account, $500 a month into a high-yield savings account, $150 a month extra on my primary mortgage. I don't think about it. I don't decide. It just executes. That automation has built wealth I wouldn't have if I relied on motivation. Because motivation comes and goes. Systems run forever. So stop trying to change your life overnight. Stop trying to be the person who does everything at once. Start being the person who does one thing consistently. Because in 5 years, the micro-commitment person will have lapped the massive action person every time, and they'll have done it without stress, burnout, or drama. Just steady, boring, relentless progress. That's the real secret to wealth, not inspiration, repetition. Start today. One micro-commitment, ridiculously small, something you can't fail at. Then do it every day for a month. Watch what happens. You'll surprise yourself. Chapter 9. The 72-hour rule for killing procrastination forever. I'm about to give you a rule that saved me probably $200,000 over the last decade, maybe more. It's called the 72-hour rule, and it's devastatingly simple. If you identify a high-value financial action, you must take a concrete step toward it within 72 hours, or you don't do it at all. That's it. That's the rule. But let me show you why it's so powerful. Here's what used to happen to me. I'd get excited about an opportunity, a property, a stock, a business idea. I'd analyze it, get pumped, tell myself, I'm doing this. Then I'd sleep on it. Let me think about it for a few days. A week later, the excitement's gone. The opportunity's gone. I'm back to my routine. That pattern cost me millions in missed deals over the years. Because here's the thing. Motivation has a half-life. It decays fast. The moment you have an insight or an idea, you're at peak motivation. That's when action is easiest. But if you wait, the motivation drops, doubt creeps in, fear takes over. Within 72 hours, that blazing certainty becomes a vague, maybe someday. And maybe someday never happens. The 72-hour rule forces you to capture momentum while it exists, not when it's convenient, not when you feel ready, when you're actually motivated to move. Let me show you how this works in practice. Example 1. Real estate deal. You find a property. Numbers look good. You're excited. Old you says, let me think about it. New you says, 72-hour rule. Within 72 hours, you either submit an offer, schedule a showing, contact a lender to get pre-approved, run detailed numbers, and send them to your mentor for review. Notice, you're not committing to buying the property in 72 hours. You're committing to moving it forward, taking one irreversible step that prevents you from drifting back into inaction. Because here's what happens. Once you've submitted an offer, your brain shifts. You're no longer thinking, should I do this? You're thinking, how do I make this work? You've changed the question your brain is solving, and that changes everything. Example 2, investment opportunity. You learn about a stock or fund that fits your strategy. You're intrigued. 72-hour rule kicks in. Within 72 hours, you either open a brokerage account if you don't have one, buy a small position, even 100, set up a recurring investment, add it to your watch list with a specific trigger, I'll buy if it drops below X. Again, you're not committing your life savings. You're committing to not letting the idea die. You're forcing engagement. Example 3, skill development. You realize you need to learn about tax strategies. You're motivated. 72-hour rule. Within 72 hours, you either buy a book on tax planning, schedule a consultation with a CPA, sign up for a course. Commit to reading one tax blog post per day for a week. You're not becoming a tax expert in 72 hours, but you're starting the process, and starting is 90% of the battle. Here's why. This rule is so critical. It eliminates the I'll do it later trap, because later is a lie. Later is where dreams go to die. Your brain uses later as a way to feel productive without committing. It's a comfort blanket. It protects you from the discomfort of action while letting you pretend you're still on track. The 72-hour rule rips that blanket away. It says, you either do this now or admit you're not going to do it. That honesty is brutal, but it's necessary. I implemented this rule in 2015 after watching myself procrastinate on a property for 3 weeks. By the time I finally decided to act, someone else had bought it. That property's worth $180,000 more today than what it sold for. I missed it because I needed more time. Since then, every opportunity gets the 72-hour rule, and my deal flow has exploded. not because I find more deals, because I close on the ones I find. I don't let momentum die. Now, here's the key. The action you take in 72 hours doesn't have to be big. It just has to be irreversible. Something that makes it harder to back out than to move forward. Submitting an offer? Irreversible. You can't unsend it. Now you're waiting for a response. Your brain is engaged. Buying $100 of a stock? Irreversible. You're in the market. Now you're tracking it. Scheduling a consultation with a CPA? Irreversible. There's a meeting on your calendar. You're committed to showing up. These small actions create forcing functions. They push you forward even when motivation fades. Because once you've taken the first step, the next step is easier. Momentum builds. But if you wait, if you think about it, momentum dies. And restarting from zero is 10x harder than continuing from step one. I see this constantly with people who want to start investing. They spend months researching. They're going to start soon, but they never pull the trigger because they're always waiting for one more piece of information, one more level of certainty. When I ask, "Did you at least open a brokerage account?" they say, "Not yet. I'm still deciding between Vanguard and Fidelity." Dude, pick one. It doesn't matter. They're both fine. The difference between them is irrelevant compared to the difference between investing and not investing. But your brain is using that decision as a way to avoid the real action, putting money into the market. 72-hour rule fixes this. Within 72 hours of deciding you want to invest, you open an account. Done. Now you can research which funds to buy. But you've eliminated the first layer of procrastination. Here's another version of this rule I use. The 10-minute rule for executing decisions. Once I've decided to do something, I commit to starting it within 10 minutes, not finishing it, starting it. Because starting is the hard part. Once I've started, I usually finish. But if I let 10 minutes pass, the decision starts to erode. Doubt creeps in. I find reasons to delay. So if I decide to submit an offer on a property, I start filling out the paperwork within 10 minutes. If I decide to invest in a stock, I log into my account within 10 minutes and hit buy. If I decide to call a lender, I pull up my phone and dial within 10 minutes. 10 minutes, that's the window. After that, the decision is no longer hot. It's cooling. And cool decisions rarely lead to action. Combine the 72-hour rule with the 10-minute rule, and you become unstoppable. You capture momentum at two critical points. When you first identify the opportunity, 72 hours, and when you decide to act, 10 minutes. Now, here's the objection I get. But what if I make a mistake? What if I act too fast and regret it? Fair question. Here's my answer. You're going to make mistakes, fast or slow. The question is, do you want to make mistakes that teach you something, or mistakes that cost you opportunity? Fast mistakes teach you. You act, it doesn't work out. You learn, you adjust. Slow mistakes, procrastination, indecision just cost you time. And time is the one resource you can't get back. I'd rather make a 5,000 mistake in week 1 than miss a 50,000 opportunity because I spent 6 months thinking about it. The mistake teaches me. The missed opportunity just haunts me. And honestly, most fast decisions aren't that risky if you're using the 72-hour rule correctly. Because you're not committing to the entire action in 72 hours. You're committing to the first step, and first steps are usually low risk. Submitting an offer, you can back out during due diligence. Buying $100 of stock, you can sell it tomorrow if you change your mind. Scheduling a consultation, you can cancel. The 72-hour rule isn't about recklessness, it's about momentum. It's about not letting good ideas die in the valley between inspiration and action. So here's your assignment. Right now, think of one financial goal you've been procrastinating on. One thing you've been meaning to do but haven't. Now ask, what's the first concrete step I could take toward this in the next 72 hours? Write it down. Be specific. Research index funds is not specific. Open a Vanguard account and deposit $100 is specific. Now, commit. You have 72 hours. After that, the opportunity expires. You either do it or admit you're not going to. No judgment if you don't, but at least you'll be honest with yourself. And honesty is the first step toward change. Because the real enemy isn't failure. It's the slow death of unrealized potential, the regret of looking back and realizing you had chances you didn't take, doors you didn't walk through. The 72-hour rule slams those doors open while the paint's still fresh, while you're still motivated. Use it, starting now. 72 hours. Go. Chapter 10. How to use accountability to weaponize your commitments. Let me tell you about the most expensive lie I ever told myself. I'll hold myself accountable. Sounds responsible, right? Self-reliant, mature, except it's complete garbage, because humans are terrible at holding themselves accountable. We're wired to let ourselves off the hook, to rationalize, to make excuses. You ever set a goal and then, when you didn't hit it, you told yourself, well, circumstances changed. It wasn't realistic anyway. I'll try again next month. Yeah, that's your brain protecting you from discomfort, and it's why you're not where you want to be. I learned this the hard way in 2012. I told myself I was going to buy 3 properties that year. I analyzed deals, made spreadsheets, set reminders. But when December rolled around, I'd bought 0. My brain had given me 100 reasons why each deal wasn't quite right, and I believed them. Then I met a guy named Rob at a real estate meetup. He asked what my goals were. I told him 3 properties in 2013. He said, "Great. Text me every Sunday with an update on your progress." I laughed. "I don't need a babysitter." He shrugged. "Cool. How'd 2012 go?" Touché. So I agreed. Every Sunday, I'd text Rob with what I'd done that week toward my goal. Offers submitted, properties analyzed, financing lined up, whatever. By March, I'd bought my first property. By July, my second. By October, my third. I hit my goal with 2 months to spare. Same person, same market, same skill set. The only difference? Rob was watching. That's the power of external accountability. It flips a switch in your brain. When you know someone's going to ask, "Did you do it?" Suddenly, you do it. Not because you're afraid of judgment, because humans are social animals. We're wired to honor commitments we make to others more than commitments we make to ourselves. It's evolutionary. If you fail yourself, you rationalize it. If you fail someone else, you risk social exclusion. Your brain treats that as a threat, so it gets its ass in gear. Here's how to weaponize this for your financial goals. Step 1. Choose an accountability partner, not a cheerleader, not someone who'll let you off the hook. You need someone who'll call you on your bullshit. A friend, a mentor, a coach, someone whose opinion you respect, and someone who has their own goals you can hold them accountable for. It should be reciprocal. Step 2. Define the commitment. Be specific. "I'm going to invest more" is useless. "I'm going to invest 200 a month in index funds every month for the next 6 months" is enforceable. Your partner can check. It's binary. You did it or you didn't. Step 3. Set the check-in cadence. Weekly is ideal. Monthly lets too much slip. Daily might be overkill unless you're working on a specific sprint. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. you send a text. "Here's what I did this week." Your partner responds, "Nice, what's the plan for next week?" Step 4. Establish consequences. This is optional but powerful. If you miss your commitment, you pay. Maybe it's $50 to charity. Maybe you have to buy lunch. The penalty doesn't have to be huge. It just has to sting enough that your brain wants to avoid it. I do this with a buddy. If either of us misses our weekly commitment, we owe the other $100. In 2 years, I've paid out $200. He's paid out $100. That's $300 total between 2 people over 2 years, meaning we've hit our commitments 97% of the time. Before we had this system, we'd hit them maybe 60% of the time. The $100 isn't even the point. The point is, when Sunday rolls around and I haven't done my thing yet, my brain screams, "Dude, you're about to owe him $100. Get moving." And I do. The penalty creates urgency. But here's what's critical. You have to actually enforce the penalty. If you let each other slide, "Oh, it's fine, you had a busy week," the system collapses. The accountability becomes meaningless. You have to be ruthless. No excuses. You didn't do it? You pay. Done. This isn't about being mean. It's about respecting the commitment. When you let someone slide, you're telling them your word doesn't matter. That's the opposite of accountability. Now, not everyone has an accountability partner available. So here's another method: public commitment. Tell the internet what you're going to do. Post on social media. I'm investing $500 a month for the next year. I'll post updates every month. Now you've got hundreds of eyes on you. Your brain hates public failure, so it'll push you to follow through. I've seen people transform their finances with this technique. One woman posted that she was going to pay off $30,000 in debt in 18 months. Every month she shared her progress, balance updates, what she cut from her budget, wins and setbacks. She paid it off in 16 months. And when I asked her why, she said, "I couldn't face my followers if I quit. I'd made it public." That's the leverage of social accountability. Your reputation is on the line, and humans protect their reputation like their lives depend on it, because in evolutionary terms, they did. Another version: join a group, a mastermind, an investing club, a financial accountability forum. Now you're surrounded by people working on the same goals. You show up to meetings, you share progress, you get feedback. The group becomes a forcing function. I run a coaching program where clients check in weekly. They share wins, they share struggles, and they sure as hell don't want to be the person who shows up week after week with nothing to report. So they act, they take risks, they move forward. Not because I'm magic, because the group creates pressure. Here's what blows my mind. People will hire a personal trainer to lose weight, but they won't hire a coach to build wealth. Why? Working out sucks, budgeting sucks, both require discipline, both benefit from accountability. But somehow, we're fine paying someone to yell at us in the gym, but we balk at paying someone to keep us on track financially. That's insane. The financial upside is exponentially higher. A trainer might help you lose 20 pounds. A financial coach might help you gain 200,000 over a decade. But we resist because money feels personal. We don't want to admit we need help. Get over it. If accountability works, and it does, use it. Pride is expensive. Now, here's the final piece: tracking. You can't be accountable for what you don't measure. If your goal is to save more, you'll fail. Because more is vague. Your brain can rationalize anything as more. I saved $50 this month instead of $0. That's more. But if your goal is to save $500 a month, you can track it. You either hit $500 or you didn't. Your accountability partner can see the number. There's no wiggle room. This is why I'm obsessed with spreadsheets. I track everything: net worth, monthly expenses, investment contributions, property cash flow. Every number is logged. Every month, I review them with my accountability partner. He sees the data. If something's off, he asks, "What happened here?" And I have to answer. I can't BS a spreadsheet. The numbers are the numbers. If you're not tracking, you're guessing. And guessing doesn't build wealth. Measurement does. So here's your move. Identify one financial goal you've been struggling with. Now find someone to hold you accountable for it. Text a friend, post online, join a group, hire a coach, whatever fits, but make it external. Don't rely on yourself. You've already proven that doesn't work. Then define the commitment. Make it specific. Make it measurable. Set a check-in schedule and enforce consequences if you miss. Do this and watch how fast you start hitting goals that used to feel impossible. Not because you got smarter, not because you got more motivated, because you made breaking your word painful, and pain is a hell of a motivator. Chapter 11. How fear of judgment costs you a fortune. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How many financial decisions have you avoided because you were worried about what people would think? Be honest. Maybe you didn't invest because you were scared your friends would think you're greedy. Maybe you didn't start a side business because your family would call it risky. Maybe you didn't negotiate your salary because you didn't want to seem ungrateful. I see this everywhere. Smart people leaving massive amounts of money on the table because they're more afraid of judgment than poverty. And it's killing them financially. Here's the truth. Most people are broke. Most people will die without building real wealth. Most people are financially illiterate and make terrible money decisions. So why the hell are you taking advice, implicit or explicit, from them? Let me tell you about Sarah. She came to me in 2019. Smart woman, engineer, making $95,000 a year. She wanted to buy a rental property, had the cash, had done the research, found a great deal. But she didn't pull the trigger. When I asked why, she said, "My parents think real estate is too risky. They told me to just keep saving." I asked, "Do your parents own any real estate?" "No." "Are they wealthy?" "No, they're living on Social Security." "So why are you taking financial advice from people who never built wealth?" She stared at me. Then she laughed. "I don't know. I guess I didn't want them to think I was making a mistake." 3 months later, she bought the property. It's cash flowed $600 a month for the past 5 years and appreciated $110,000. That's $36,000 in cash flow plus $110,000 in equity. She made $146,000 by ignoring her parents' advice. And here's the kicker. Her parents now ask her for money advice because she's building wealth and they're not. This is the pattern. People who haven't achieved what you want will always have opinions on how you should pursue it. And those opinions are almost always wrong because they're based on fear, not experience. Your broke friend who tells you investing is risky, they're not protecting you. They're protecting their own ego. Because if you succeed, it proves they could have succeeded too. And they didn't. So they need you to fail to justify their own inaction. Your family members who tell you to play it safe, they're projecting their own regrets. They took the safe path. It didn't lead to wealth. But admitting that means confronting their own choices. Easier to just convince you to follow the same path so they don't feel alone. This is called crabs in a bucket mentality. When one crab tries to climb out, the others pull it back down. Not because they're evil. Because if one escapes, it highlights that escape was always possible. And they chose not to try. Human psychology works the same way. Your peer group has an invisible ceiling, an unspoken agreement about what's normal. Make $60,000, that's fine. Make $200,000, you're showing off. Buy 1 property, that's ambitious. Buy 10, you're getting too big for your britches. The group enforces the ceiling, not through explicit rules, through judgment, through subtle comments, through raised eyebrows, through questions like, "Don't you think that's risky?" Or, "Must be nice to have that kind of money." And if you're not careful, that judgment will keep you small, because humans are wired for belonging. We evolved in tribes. Getting excluded from the tribe meant death. So our brains are hypersensitive to social disapproval. When you sense judgment, your brain screams, "Danger! They don't approve. Adjust behavior." And you do. You shrink, you play small, you avoid risks that might trigger more judgment. This is why so many smart people stay broke. Not because they can't build wealth, because they're more afraid of standing out than staying stuck. I spent years trapped in this. I made good money, but I was terrified of seeming too successful. I'd downplay my wins, avoid talking about investments, drive a modest car even though I could afford better. Why? Because I didn't want people to think I was flashy, or greedy, or out of touch. But you know what that cost me? Opportunities. Because when you hide your success, you also hide your ambition, and ambitious people are attracted to other ambitious people. By playing small, I was filtering out the exact network I needed to grow. It wasn't until I stopped caring about judgment that everything accelerated. I started talking openly about my investments, my goals, my failures. And guess what happened? I attracted better people. People who were also building, who weren't intimidated by success, who wanted to collaborate and grow together. The crabs fell away, the climbers showed up. Here's how you break free from the fear of judgment. 1. Audit your circle. Who are you spending time with? Are they building wealth or complaining about money? Are they taking risks or playing it safe? Are they lifting you up or pulling you down? If your closest 5 friends are broke and unmotivated, you will be too. Find new friends. This sounds harsh, but it's true. You become the average of the people you surround yourself with. 2. Stop explaining yourself. When you make a financial move, you don't owe anyone an explanation. You're buying a property? Cool. You don't need to justify it to your cousin who's never owned anything. You're investing heavily? Great. You don't need approval from your coworker who keeps their money in a savings account. Stop seeking validation from people who aren't where you want to be. 3. Reframe judgment as information. When someone criticizes your financial choices, ask yourself, is this person qualified to have an opinion? If they're not wealthy, not investing, not taking risks, their opinion is irrelevant. It's not data. It's noise. Ignore it. 4. Find your tribe. You need people who get it. Join an investing group, a mastermind, an online community. Surround yourself with people who are doing what you want to do. When everyone around you is buying properties, investing, building businesses, that becomes normal. The judgment disappears because the standards have shifted. 5. Own your ambition. Stop apologizing for wanting wealth. Wanting financial freedom isn't greedy, it's smart. You're not taking from anyone by building wealth. You're creating value. You're securing your future. You're setting an example. Be loud about it. The right people will respect it. The wrong people will reveal themselves. I'll give you an example. I post openly on social media about my investments, my wins, my losses, my goals. I get DMs all the time from people saying, "Must be nice," or "Not everyone has money like you." You know what I do? I ignore them. Because those people aren't trying to learn. They're trying to justify their inaction by making me the villain. I'm not playing that game. But I also get DMs from people saying, "How did you do that? Can you teach me?" Those are my people. Those are the ones I engage with, the ones willing to learn instead of judge. The judgment will never stop. As you grow, it'll get louder, because success makes mediocrity uncomfortable. But that's not your problem. Your problem is whether you're going to let other people's insecurity dictate your financial future. And here's the final truth. The people judging you, they're not thinking about you as much as you think. They're worried about their own lives. Your success is a blip on their radar. They'll judge for 5 minutes, then move on. But you'll live with the consequences of letting that judgment stop you for the rest of your life. So ask yourself, do you want to be wealthy and judged, or broke and liked? Because you can't have both, at least not in the early stages. Once you've built wealth, the judgment fades. People respect success even if they resent it. But to get there, you have to be willing to be misunderstood, criticized, doubted. That's the price of admission, and it's a bargain compared to the alternative. Chapter 12. The Deathbed Test for Financial Procrastination. I want you to imagine something. You're 85 years old. You're lying in a hospital bed. You've got maybe a week left. Your kids are there, your grandkids. You're looking back on your life. And I want you to ask yourself, what financial decision will I regret not making? Not the decision that went wrong, the decision you never made, the risk you didn't take, the opportunity you let slip because you were too scared, too busy, too not ready. What will haunt you? I think about this constantly. Because here's the thing. Nobody on their deathbed says, "I wish I'd been more cautious." They say, "I wish I'd taken more risks. I wish I'd started earlier. I wish I'd bet on myself." The regrets aren't about what you did. They're about what you didn't do. Let me tell you about my dad. He's 72 now, retired, comfortable, but not wealthy. And when I asked him recently if he had any financial regrets, he said, "I wish I'd invested when I was young. Your uncle kept telling me to buy stocks. I always said I'd do it next year. Next year never came." He's not bitter, but there's a weight in his voice when he talks about it. Because he knows what could have been. If he'd just started at 30, if he'd just put away $200 a month, he'd have a couple million right now instead of living on Social Security and a small pension. But he didn't. And now it's too late to fix it. That's the cost of procrastination. Not just money, time. You can always make more money. You can never make more time. And the older you get, the more expensive procrastination becomes. Because compound interest needs time to work. Take that away, and you're left with regret. So here's the test I want you to run on every financial goal you're procrastinating on. The deathbed test. Close your eyes. Fast forward to the end of your life. You're looking back. Now ask, will I regret not starting this? Will I wish I'd been braver? Will I resent myself for letting fear stop me? If the answer is yes, you have to start. Not next month, not next year, now. Because the pain of regret is infinitely worse than the pain of failure. Failure teaches you. Regret just haunts you. I use this test constantly. A few years ago, I was debating whether to start a coaching business. I had a good income from real estate. Coaching would be risky, time-intensive. What if it failed? What if I looked like an idiot? Then I asked, will I regret not trying? The answer was instant. Yes, I'd wonder what if for the rest of my life. So I started. And it's now one of the most fulfilling parts of my career. But if I'd let fear win, I'd be sitting here wishing I'd done it. That's the power of the deathbed test. It cuts through all the noise, all the rationalizations, all the excuses. It gets to the truth. Does this matter enough to risk discomfort? And if it does, you act. Because the only thing worse than failing is never trying. Now, let me be clear. This doesn't mean you should take every risk. Some ideas are genuinely bad. Some opportunities aren't worth it. But most of the time, the risks you're avoiding aren't dangerous. They're just uncomfortable. Investing in the market? Worst case, you lose some money, you'll recover. Not investing, you guarantee mediocrity. Which is worse, buying a rental property? Worst case, you deal with a bad tenant or lose a little money. You'll survive. Not buying, you miss decades of compounding equity and cash flow. Which is worse, starting a business? Worst case, it fails and you're out time and money. You'll learn. Not starting? You spend the rest of your life working for someone else, wondering if you could have built something. Which is worse? When you frame it this way, the answer's obvious. The risk of action is temporary. The risk of inaction is permanent. I see people constantly choosing permanent regret over temporary discomfort, and it breaks my heart. Because they're not stupid, they're not lazy, they're just scared, and nobody taught them how to override fear with long-term thinking. So let me teach you. Step 1. Identify the financial goal you've been avoiding longest, the one that makes your stomach twist when you think about it. Step 2. Run the deathbed test. Will I regret not doing this? Step 3. If yes, commit to starting this week, not someday. This week, use the 72-hour rule. Take one irreversible step. Step 4. When fear shows up, and it will, remind yourself, this discomfort is temporary. Regret is forever. I'm choosing temporary over permanent. That's it. That's the framework. It's simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. Because here's what'll happen. You'll start. You'll feel scared. Your brain will scream at you to stop. It'll manufacture reasons why this is a bad idea, why you should wait, why you're not ready. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. Listen to the fear. Or listen to the future version of yourself who's looking back and begging you not to quit. Which voice do you trust more? I've made a lot of financial mistakes in my life. Overpaid for properties, invested in companies that went under, trusted the wrong partners. Every single one of those mistakes hurt, cost me money, kept me up at night. But you know what I don't regret? Trying. Because every failure taught me something, made me sharper, better, more capable. The mistakes I do regret, the opportunities I passed on, the deals I let someone else take because I was being cautious, the years I spent researching instead of acting, those haunt me, because I'll never get them back. Don't let that be your story. Don't get to 85 and realize you spent your whole life preparing for a life you never lived. You've got one shot at this, one chance to build something, to take risks, to bet on yourself, to create wealth and freedom and options. Don't waste it being careful. Be smart. Run the numbers. Do your homework. But then move, because the clock's ticking, and it doesn't care about your excuses. So run the deathbed test, right now, on the goal you've been avoiding. Will you regret not starting? If yes, start today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because your future self is counting on you, and they're begging you not to let them down. Conclusion. Your financial ignition starts now. We've covered a lot. Let me bring it home. You now have the tools to overcome financial procrastination. The 5-minute rule, micro-commitments, the 72-hour rule, accountability, the deathbed test. These aren't theories. These are weapons. And they work. But only if you use them. Because here's the final truth. Everything you've read means nothing if you don't act. I can give you the best strategies in the world. But if you close this audiobook and go back to someday, you've wasted your time and mine. So I'm going to leave you with one assignment, one action, right now. Before this audiobook ends, I want you to commit to one micro action. Something small. Something you can do in the next 5 minutes. It could be opening a brokerage account, texting a friend to be your accountability partner, transferring $20 to savings, submitting an offer on a property you've been eyeing, logging into your bank and reviewing your spending, Googling real estate investing meetups near me. Whatever it is, it has to be concrete, not think about investing, not research budgeting. Do something. Take one tiny step that moves you forward, and then, this is critical, build on it. Tomorrow, take another step. The next day, another. String together enough small actions, and in 6 months, you won't recognize your financial life, because that's how wealth is built, not in one giant leap, in 1,000 tiny steps. Boring, consistent, relentless. You don't need to be smarter. You don't need to be luckier. You just need to start, and keep starting. Every day. The procrastination poison, it's real. It's killed more financial dreams than market crashes ever will. But you have the antidote now. Use it. Your move.